been a tough week for people named Zucker.
Or for that matter, Zuckerberg.
But are stories about Facebook and CNN really about something else?
We'll look into consolidation and changes on today's Future Forward.
I'm Alexis Cordato.
And I am Stephen Rosenbaum. Let us launch. Hey, Alexa.
Hey, Steve.
So at first I wasn't sure that the Zuckerberg stories really fit in the same pod. But the more reading I've been doing and the more we've been planning the show, the more I am convinced that they are very much in the same story for reasons that are maybe going to surprise some listeners, at least one would hope.
I'm excited to hear you piece it all together.
Well, I'm not going to do that alone. I'm going to lure you into your own analysis. But let's just start, if we can, with Zuckerberg. Because, here's the thing. I think that that you will know better maybe than most, which is like they changed the name of the company to Meta, right? What was that, like 2 months ago?
Mm-hmm.
But what we know, having been in both big companies and small, is that process began 2 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, at least a year ago for sure.
Yeah, changing the branding. And so I actually had a call with Facebook the other day about a tech issue I was having with their ad product, which I ended up on the phone with someone in Denmark, and he kept talking about Meta. Well, here at Meta, and I was like, can we just say Facebook? And he's like, well, you mean Meta? And I'm like, no,
I'm actually
surprised
you were able to get someone on the phone. Was that a hard, not to take us on a tangent, but was that a process?
No, I have a secret. There is a backdoor concierge for people that spend money with them. You just have to know there's a way to braille to it, but I would never give it away.
Okay, because people have issues with that, and sometimes it's like you need to be spending a lot of money.
Yeah, no, I'm not spending a lot of money. Anyway, my point was, like, so if you're, Zuckerberg, you've been seeing data that we know anecdotally, right? We know that Facebook is old and getting older, that it's like lots of grandparents, lots of parents, some, people that are 30 years old, very few young people. So if you're Zuckerberg, the trend lines have been evident to you that Facebook was aging out, for three or 4 years, maybe even longer.
For sure.
Yeah, and moving over to Insta, but also what provably is moving to Snap. And this was even before TikTok became the thing that it is today. And so, like, you've had a really long roadmap to know that these changes were aimed at, were coming toward you. At the same time, you've got this incredibly profitable, misinformation, political, fake news, anti-COVID kind of drama that if you're Zuckerberg, you've got a real problem, because Wall Street says, we just want to see quarterly numbers. We don't really exactly care where they come from. We just want to see up and to the right quarterly numbers. And so that you're taking hits off this drug, this addictive drug, which is essentially reducing the quality of the platform for advertisers and for mainstream users, but keeping the numbers going up. So you made that bargain with the devil, going back now 5 years.
Yep.
You knew that the piper was going to come calling, right? Like, that was either the federal government was going to, break you up, or Congress was going to do something, or, Section 230 was going to happen, or, like, all those things were there was an inevitable day of reckoning. And the Meta announcement, I get it. I think it was a good announcement. I think it's a good strategy. I have a feeling history is going to write that the journey to the metaverse is just a longer road than they have, the bandwidth to get to.
So how much do you see the metaverse being something that is forward-looking versus a reaction of something that they're losing now?
Oh, no, no, no. I'm not willing to be that negative. I think it's forward looking. So, I bought an Oculus, pair of Oculus,
Mm,
and
do you like it?
it's I do. I
Wow.
do.
What are you playing?
Just getting my arms around it, using spaces and trying to kind of get used to how so it is a chicken egg thing, right? Because if your friends aren't on it, then it's a little weird, right? Like I don't want to show up at a room full of teenagers. Like um but here's a slightly off topic question, but I don't think it is actually. Has anyone taken an Oculus and broken it down part by part and figured out what the actual cost of the device is?
Not that I know of, but remember Google a few years ago? They had like the cardboard ones.
Yeah.
Those were cheap or cheaper.
Not yeah. So this is a computer. I mean, it
Yeah.
literally is a wireless device. You wear it. It's $299, which is absurdly cheap. It's comfortable. Um, and I haven't Googled this, and I probably should have before the pod, but I think if you looked, you'd find that it maybe breaks even on a cost for parts basis, but maybe it doesn't. It may be they
Hmm.
actually are selling it below cost to get like significant audience. Maybe I'm still the product. Maybe they're giving me a $400 device for $299 and eating the $100 margin to get
Yeah.
me on it. Um, but um, you know, I could see my teams having meetings on it for sure. I could see having events on it. I built a NYC Media Lab space that's got logos on all the walls and it's kind of cool. And um,
It's been about
but
3 years since I've had one on. Is it light or
yeah,
do you
like
feel it is light? Okay. I
yeah,
feel like earlier versions I tried, I was like, I don't know if I could wear this for an hour.
yeah. No, the the biggest problem is the fact that you're as geeky as anyone I know, and I'm probably a close number two to you, and I just bought one, and you don't have one, right? So
And
like,
have
there's
like
no
negative interest.
right now, in part because it's Facebook, so you've already got bad Facebook juju karma. Because do you really want to? And you have to log in through Facebook, which is a little. I mean, I don't know that I think this is the killer device that will make the metaverse happen. But a lot of things. I mean, I don't think whether Zuckerberg remains as CEO or not is I think the real question is going to be, does the downward slide continue, or is this the bottom?
Oh, I don't think I think this is I think it's gonna be analogous to AOL or MySpace. It's like a multi-year process.
So the Guardian has an article out, and the headline is, "For the first time in its history, Facebook is in decline. Has the tech giant begun to crumble?"
I mean, there are a lot of headwinds in the sense that Apple, um, ever since they rolled out changes to their privacy and data collection policy, ATT, their app tracking transparency, it's really handicapped Facebook's core product. It just makes it much more difficult to track and target users on Apple devices, which is like a non-trivial amount of market share.
I, I understand that, although I have to say that every website I go to now has a great big cookies kind of blot across the screen and says accept cookies. And even though Apple's trying to, essentially say this app, they want fine, you can't track users surreptitiously, but more and more people are just saying to me, you don't have a choice. Let me track you or go away. So, um,
But don't you feel
It
like on
seems
your apps, like you've had so many um, instances where you said no, don't track me?
I have,
Yeah,
but
so
then
like every
but then
single
it's still,
time you've said no, that's been a loss of data.
yeah. I get what Apple's doing. I mean, I think they're doing it for the right reasons, and I think consumers don't like being treated like a product. That being said, I, I guess I guess the question is, so here's the Wall Street Journal article: Zuckerberg effect is fading in social media. Um, Here's the thing: I think people over the age of blank don't understand. I don't know what that age is. Maybe it's 30. Maybe it's 35. Like, if you spend any amount of time on TikTok or Snap specifically, it is such a different experience than Facebook or Instagram. Um, it's frothier, it's more controversial, it's more entertaining, it's more tongue in cheek, it moves faster, it's shorter. Like, it's just, it's, there isn't any, like Zuckerberg saying to the team, as he did for last week, you need to go get to short form video. Um, my answer to that is, you know, you know, Facebook's been trying to get to video for how long? You know,
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, it's like it's not even really a technical thing, right? In the sense, it's not just about like having a video player that pops up or whatever. It's the content, and that's predicated on the people who make it. And so, if they're already starting with a base that's thinning out, I think it's going to be hard to really lure back creators in a way that allows them to turn it around. But
and meanwhile, not wasn't as widely reported as the Facebook meltdown last week, but YouTube's numbers were shockingly good.
mhm.
Now, part of that is YouTube's changing its business model and is essentially becoming over the air,
And
cord
YouTube was
cutter
always
cable
video
television.
first.
Yeah.
Yeah, YouTube
Um,
was always video first.
but I think one of the questions that history will answer is, there was a time when Facebook was, as an experience, I'm going to sound old when I say this, really pleasant. Like, really community, and you could, other people that had dogs you had, or friends, or someone having a baby, or like, I mean, it was. And then as it became darker and more political and more controversial and angrier, it just became less joyful. And I know that Zuckerberg tried to make the pivot to groups, whatever that was, 3 years ago, essentially trying to find a way to protect that community feeling in more private, a permission only environment. But it was half hearted. Um, and I just, I think net, you know, the question is, if I think what's arrived, and why this is an interesting story, is there's this conflict between what people will watch and what advertisers want. And being salacious and controversial and angry and political and misleading and dishonest may take your may increase engagement, but I don't think that that's the basis of a long-term business strategy. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, again, it's really hard for me to imagine how they're going to focus their product and content strategy, because it's like the what is like the ethos of a Facebook. In some ways, it's been a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And so, in the absence of not having that focus, like, it, even if they were like, hey, we're going to pay you, I don't know, $1,000 per video to make content on Facebook, what is that? What is that content? Right? It's like they're on Snapchat, on TikTok, there's an aspect of like humor, formats, duets, dances. Like it's the ethos of it is meant to be entertaining and joyful. I think I just think it's going to be it'll be interesting to see how they try to kind of attack that problem.
Yeah, I mean, one could argue Spotify is having some smaller version of the same thing, which is, listening to music is great, but unfortunately, the actual distinction between, Spotify and Apple Music and Tidal and Amazon Music, you can get your, you know, pop music and or Beatles and or Rolling Stones at any of those places. So their decision to go kind of harder, edgier podcasts makes them distinctive, but also has walked them into a world of pain.
Yeah.
Uh, and as of Friday, with all of this Joe Rogan N-word stuff coming up, like I'm not sure that they, the thing that you understand is that being in the content curation, content moderation space, like that's not something you can build overnight. Like you can't
Mm-hmm.
switch on, an editorial filter.
Yeah. I had a old friend who said, "Trust is consistency over time," and time is really like the X factor here. But they always say competition is good, so this might actually be um, an opportunity in the end for Facebook to really wield its resources in a much more focused way. This is like the most optimistic I'm going to be about Facebook.
All right, so
uh,
so so let's move on to CNN because I think you'll see some surprising similarities in the story. So, you know, on the surface, the media reported Jeff Zucker had he fired Chris Cuomo. He didn't give Chris Cuomo his severance. Chris Cuomo said, "I'm going to go get you." Then when they were doing the research, they found that Zucker was dating somebody within the company that was a subordinate of his, broke the rules, out he goes. Like that's kind of the high level reporting on the story. Um, but there's a lot more there. A lot more there. So
and it wasn't like
sorry.
he just had a relationship. This isn't like a Me Too story where he's getting
No.
canceled, right?
Well, which, yes. So the question, whether he had his support. All right. So let's, first of all, a disclaimer. I know Jeff. Our kids went to school together. One of his younger son ended up getting stock in a company that I bought, Waywire. I did not give his son stock. That was done before I acquired the company. Had nothing to do with it. I haven't spoken to him in years. We're not buddies. I don't have any inside information here, but like I do. If you Google my name and his, you go back to Waywire, there's coverage in which it would appear like we were in the same room, which occasionally we were. That being said,
PTA meetings.
yeah, honestly, it's kind of true. So, the staff at CNN today sees Jeff's departure as the writing on the wall about what's going to happen after the Discovery Warner Media merger. And the Discovery Warner Media merger is not getting much coverage in the consumer press because it's a little hard to get your head around. Discovery, isn't that the Science Channel? And how is it Discovery is buying HBO? And I'm confused. Like it's a little puzzling when you look at
From
all
a
the brands.
streaming standpoint, Discovery is actually like super underrated.
In terms of
Discovery
numbers, or
Plus. No, like again, as someone who loves like HGTV and Food Network, it's the best.
I like Halloween, so we can just. I don't
Right.
understand watching. I don't understand until
To each his
Smell-O-Vision comes
own.
along. I don't understand people watching food without smell. But here's the name. If you go back into the so Jeff Zucker began in the early days at NBC, the Today Show, rose in the ranks at NBC, ended up running all programming at NBC, which was a somewhat checkered piece of his history, but was the guy who got Donald Trump the apprentice and was thought of as a Donald Trump friend, and lots of press going back, Trump would have you believe that he made Jeff Zucker. Jeff managed him like talent, whatever. Jeff moves over to CNN as Trump is running, gearing up his run, and Jeff sees in Trump money because Trump is ratings. And I don't know if you remember running up to the election, but Hillary was like, yeah, I'm going to vote for Hillary, but there wasn't anything about her on television that made you go, honey, quick, Hillary's on, you got to watch. And Trump just lit the screen up with batshit crazy, like just batshit crazy. And so that really helped Jeff make the numbers at CNN for a very long time. And there is, if you go back in history, some real animosity about the fact that Zucker, both through The Apprentice and then through CNN, kind of made Trump into what he became. Flash forward, CNN turns hard left and kind of goes after Trump, and Trump just badmouths the shit out of Jeff, and they're now arch enemies. So depending on when you pick up the Jeff timeline, he's either Trump's friend or Trump's enemy, and either of those are arguably true.
I was following none of this, but it's so fascinating. It almost sounds like an entire season of
like Billions.
Succession.
Yeah. It is. But the reason I tell you all that is Discovery is controlled and majority owned by a name that probably very few of our listeners even know. His name is John Malone. John Malone, back in the olden days of TCI, which is a cable company you've never heard of, essentially was the builder of what is now modern cable television. And John is a libertarian, and those come in different flavors. He is a Trump supporter. He's a Trump donor of significant hundreds of thousands of dollars at least and more. And he is going to be, and Zaslav at Discovery works for him, and he's the guy pulling the strings. And so the real question for CNN is, will the John Malone Discovery ownership essentially be the end of whichever version of CNN you think exists today, either moderate, middle of the road journalism or right wing or left wing liberal journalism? I don't have a dog in that race. I'm not going to call out where CNN lies on the political spectrum, but certainly if Malone wants CNN to be a supporter of Donald Trump or of the right wing or of libertarianism, pick whichever, like Jeff wasn't going to take it there. And so Jeff's firing under John, it wasn't like Malone said, we really need CNN and CNN Plus and all this stuff to grow. Jeff's a really good guy. We'll overlook the indiscretion about him dating someone who's a subordinate. They could have, done what they do. They could have hired a bunch of lawyers and had a review and spent months reviewing it and had a white paper. They didn't do that. So he got shown the door, is my point.
How much editorial oversight do executives have? Might be a naive question, but
it's not a naive question. How much editorial oversight does Rupert Murdoch have? 100%. 100%.
And you think John Malone had equal weight in terms of how CNN bends?
Different. Not the same. Murdoch's an owner, publisher. Malone is a board member. No, I think he's got a say over who runs the divisions. And I think all he had to say, to Zaslav is, Zucker, can't we do better? Yeah, he's great and all, but I don't know.
And you
Just
think
seems like,
Zucker was more heavy handed in terms of his influence over CNN's coverage?
oh, absolutely. I mean, that's a
Yeah.
known fact. Yeah, I mean, it, but you're asking, part of it is if you work in any of these companies, you kind of know which way the wind's blowing. Like, you know, yeah, you can put on a pro Trump, Trump is MAGA, Trump's going to win re-election story on your newscast, and someone's going to say to you, I don't know, uh, you know, I mean, they won't spike it. It just, the wind just blows a little chilly in your direction. Um, but the reason I'm telling you this story, and the reason I tie the two Zuck stories together, Zuckerberg and Zucker, is in both cases, they've ridden a bumpy road to get to where we are in terms of balancing politics and opportunism and the needs of investors. That's the other thing you have to remember about all of these things is, the people that are, like, for example, let me ask you, do you know who's on the board of News Corp, Rupert Murdoch's company?
Nope. I'm nodding my
Of
head.
course, right. Of course you don't.
Yeah.
I mean, and if you Google it, which I did, you'll find a couple names you've heard of, the former Speaker of the House, for example, and a bunch of people you've literally just are like, who? What? Like, I mean, at the end of the day, people that are investors in these companies want returns. Nobody's investing in Discovery or investing in News Corp. Partly they care about the politics or the programming, but mostly they want, it's a financial decision.
I mean,
And
Scott Galloway has a
similarly,
whole thing about this, which is like, what's up with corporate governance? Can it be more than just about the returns?
yeah, good luck with that. But I also think, at the same time, you know, it wasn't that long ago that news organizations weren't inherently public companies with a profit motivation. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
hitting your numbers was not what the newspaper in your community woke up thinking about.
It's a different podcast topic, maybe for next week. But I was reading an article about how the NCAA is basically killing off its Olympian pipeline by underfunding certain sports because all the money is going to basketball and football. And like the long term implications of it is like the United States just won't produce Olympic athletes in other categories. Um,
Yeah, it's actually so in the case of CNN, Discovery, Time Warner, HBO, blah 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 blah, this monolith thing that's being built. Um, the real question is, you know, does news deserve to be, driven by sheer volume and profit? And I would say similarly, the same question could be asked about, Facebook, which is, do we want our community to, be driven by, you know, how many, you know, right wing Republican ads can get put on the page?
mm, So basically, you're comparing these two stories through the lens of like these are institutions, they're services, they impact society at large, and corporate interests are basically getting in the way. Is that your thesis?
Yeah. So by the way, here's two comments that have come in from our friend Karol Marchenko Fenster. He says, quote, a coward's way out would be to sell CNN or spin it off and then sell it, said cable TV pioneer and longtime chairman of Liberty Media, John Malone. So he's not going to sell it. He's not going to spin it off. And then Karol goes on, quote, this is the Malone quote. I would like to see CNN evolve back to the kind of journalism that it started with and actually have journalists, which would be a unique and refreshing, said cable TV pioneer, Liberty Media, John Malone, which is a major shareholder of Discovery. I do believe good journalism could have a role in the future portfolio at Discovery, that Time Warner is going to represent. So I mean, this is Malone saying clearly and without any, without being unclear, we're going to make changes in CNN. We are going to go back to what he describes as unique early days balanced journalism. Okay. I think he's going to have to be willing to walk away from significant revenues.
What do you think? Who has it harder? Facebook trying to compete in the video space, or CNN trying to rebrand itself? I guess I don't know if it's a rebrand or take it in a new direction.
So here's why that's an unanswerable question from where I sit. Because in order to answer that question, you'd need to know the balance sheet. You need to know how much of CNN's revenue.
So you're saying money talks. Okay.
Well, no. But I'm saying, a big chunk of CNN's revenue comes from cable subscribers. That when you pay your cable bill every month, a chunk of that money goes to them, and it's not variable based on audience. So there's advertising revenue, there's subscriber revenue. They're launching their own direct to consumer CNN Plus product because cable is on the decline. So it's a complicated balance sheet, and losing a show at 9:00 isn't going to dramatically change the revenue in the near term. Facebook, on the other hand, I mean, what did you say? You compared it to Friendster at the beginning of the pod.
It's like AOL or MySpace.
Those are harsh, painful. I mean, for you to pop those names off and point them in the direction of Facebook, like that stings.
Yeah, I mean, everyone is saying like, oh, they died. Like Facebook's dead, and it's happening fast. And it's all relative. Like I don't think we've seen big tech die fast. It's years in the making.
Yeah, I mean, AOL continued to make its money on dial-up for a really long time, but
it's wild. But then I was reading a headline the other day, like Tumblr is like kind of getting revived.
Come on, stop.
Yeah, we should talk about that next week.
Tumblr?
Mm-hmm. And you know who's on Tumblr a lot? Gen Z. Like over half of their new users are all young.
That's interesting. All right, well, we are out of time. This was really fun. So keep your eye out for the various Zucks and Zuckerbergs, because they all start with the letter Z. So who else? We have to think of another Z person that could be next for next week.
Okay, we'll think about it.
All right. Till then, have an excellent week. Watch the news. See you very, very, very soon. Bye.